Have you ever felt weighed down by lingering regrets, toxic relationships, or anxieties that tug at your mind day after day? What if there was an ancient wisdom to gently free you from these mental chains? The Stoics believed that much of our suffering stems from clutching too tightly, whether to outcomes, possessions, or old hurts, rather than living with free hands and a clear heart. Today, we'll explore 10 essential steps in the Stoic practice of letting go, weaving fresh examples, practical reflections, and timeless insights into one continuous narrative. By the end, you'll discover how releasing what isn't truly yours to hold can bring renewed energy, freedom, and calm. No dramatic leaps required, just mindful progress. If you're ready to break free from the burdens holding you back, make sure to subscribe, because mastery of letting go isn't a one-time shift. It's a transformative journey toward inner peace and unshakable resilience. Now let's begin. Lesson 1. Understand how attachment forms and why it weighs you down. Picture your daily life. You're checking your phone at sunrise, heart pounding if you see no new messages or the wrong kind of news. Maybe you cling to a relationship or to an ideal self-image. I must always succeed. I have to be liked. These attachments might appear normal, but in Stoic eyes, trouble arises once your sense of self and emotional balance hinge on them. Marcus Aurelius often noted that we don't suffer from events themselves, but from how we interpret and bind ourselves to them. Consider someone who obsesses about keeping their car flawless. A single scratch ignites anger or despair, overshadowing an entire week. Why? Because their self-esteem is interwoven with the car's condition. Stoics would remind them that the car is a transitory thing, subject to wear, and your internal peace shouldn't be so easily compromised. The same logic governs intangible attachments, like external validation. If your well-being relies on perpetual praise from colleagues or social media, you're at their mercy. Any small criticism or drop in likes can spark anxiety. Recognizing this, you begin to see letting go as a path to reclaim your inner steadiness. To apply this, first identify a source of stress, maybe the fear you'll lose a cherished object or the dread of job instability. Ask, have I merged my happiness with keeping or controlling this? If the answer is yes, that's your wake-up call. You can still value the item or role, but approach it with gentler hands, acknowledging you remain whole regardless. This perspective shift can be subtle, but over time it dramatically reduces your baseline anxiety. You realize, it's not the object or role that traps me, but my unwillingness to imagine life without it. Once you see that mental bind, you open a path toward liberation. Lesson 2. Disentangle control. Focus on your sphere, yield the rest. A foundational Stoic concept is recognizing that while you can shape your thoughts, decisions, and moral efforts, external outcomes remain largely beyond your grasp. Letting go becomes far simpler once you stop trying to manipulate the outside world. Suppose you're anxious about a major reorganization at work. You can excel in your tasks, update your resume, propose improvements, but the final outcome might hinge on budget cuts or managerial decisions. If you tie your peace to, I must keep my exact role, you anchor yourself to something you cannot seal. Stoics advise, do your best, then accept what unfolds. Ironically, that acceptance doesn't weaken your drive, it clarifies it. You invest in what you truly can control, your performance, your readiness, while releasing the rest. Similar lessons apply in relationships. You cannot force a friend to adopt your worldview or a sibling to correct their poor habits. You can discuss, encourage, or model better behavior, but they decide their own path. If you cling to the idea, I must make them change, you shoulder a burden that's not yours to carry. Letting go here means stepping back from the outcome. You remain supportive, but your core peace doesn't hinge on their choices. When you first adopt this approach, you may feel uneasy, like you're relinquishing a sense of safety. But as time passes, you realize the safety you craved was an illusion. Freed from the delusion of controlling the uncontrollable, you gain genuine power over your mindset and actions. Instead of wringing your hands about global issues you can't single-handedly solve, You channel your concern into local activism or personal growth. Rather than micromanaging a friend's diet, you focus on cooking healthy meals for yourself, sharing recipes if they ask. Accepting this is not passivity. It's focusing your energy on the domain you can shape, your perspective and your deliberate efforts. By letting go of the rest, you avoid endless frustration. You ride life's current with a stable, self-possessed attitude, prepared to adapt when outside events shift. Far from helplessness, it's a shift into rational clarity and purposeful action. Lesson 3. Transform painful memories into lessons, not chains. We often remain tethered to events that hurt us in the past, failures, betrayals, or humiliations. Stoics recognize the harm in letting old injuries define your ongoing reality. Instead, you can turn them into stepping stones for moral and emotional progress. Maybe you repeatedly revisit a friend's betrayal, letting it color how you see all friendships. A Stoic perspective nudges you to examine that memory. Yes, it hurt, but does this mean every friend will betray me? Through reflection, you glean the wisdom. Maybe more careful boundaries are needed next time, while releasing the bitterness that blocks future trust. Similarly, if you regret a choice, like staying too long in a job that drained your health, endless self-chastisement keeps the wound fresh. The Stoic remedy is identifying how you'll approach such scenarios differently now. Perhaps you'll be more attuned to burnout signals or more assertive about boundaries. Recognizing the memory as a catalyst for growth undercuts its power to torment you. Over months, you might find that recalling the event is less painful, more instructive. This approach also addresses how you see yourself. If you label yourself a perpetual victim or loser due to one major setback, you feed a narrative that weighs you down. Stoics would say, that event is a fragment, not your entire story. By gleaning the lesson, like the need for better time management or more flexible communication, and practicing it, you elevate that memory from a chain to a teacher. Each time the memory resurfaces with an emotional pang, you remind yourself you've done the work, you've integrated the insight, and you're no longer repeating that mistake. The emotional hook loosens. Over time, you see that you can retain the facts of the past while letting go of its emotional grip. This transition can be subtle. One day, you realize you can talk about that old regret without a surge of shame. It's evidence you freed yourself. The memory can remain, but as a neutral narrative or a learning moment, rather than a perpetual burden stifling your present joy. Lesson 4. Use silence and reflection to ease emotional overload. Modern life bombards us with noise, constant notifications, chatter, demands to respond instantly. Stoics champion purposeful silence as a respite where you can observe swirling emotions without fueling them. When tension spikes, maybe you sense heartbreak approaching or a wave of self-doubt. Step away. 2 or 3 minutes of quiet reflection or deep breathing can break the chain reaction that leads to panic or overthinking. Consider a scenario. You receive unexpected bad news via text. Instead of frantically calling everyone to vent, you might find a calm spot, set a timer for 5 minutes, and just sit. You notice the adrenaline, the urge to catastrophize. As you acknowledge each emotion, you also watch it crest and begin to ebb. The crisis might still remain, but you feel less controlled by fear. Once you've given yourself that pocket of stillness, you can act more wisely. This doesn't demand an elaborate meditation routine. It might be a short, quiet evening check-in, journaling your biggest concern of the day and deciding if it's truly worth carrying into tomorrow. That single act of naming it, then letting it go fosters mental hygiene. Over weeks, you find you're less reactive in tense discussions. You have a mental reservoir of calm to draw upon. In relationships, you might hold back from escalating an argument, opting for a measured pause that says, I hear you. Let me think before responding. That pause alone diffuses half the negativity. Furthermore, silence can be integrated into your busiest moments. For instance, you might drive to work without music or news, letting your mind process yesterday's stress. By the time you arrive, you've sorted through emotional clutter, more able to focus on the new day. This stoic rest and quiet principle transforms how you handle daily challenges, from minor irritations to major curveballs. Over time, it becomes your invisible shield against stress accumulation. You discover that letting go doesn't have to be an epic decision. It can be the small, consistent act of stepping into silence, releasing tension bit by bit, until your mind breathes more freely in every domain of life. Lesson 5. Practice targeted negative visualization to soften fear. The Stoic technique of negative visualization helps you dissolve the dread clinging to possible future losses, like a cherished possession or job. You briefly imagine the scenario of losing it, letting yourself envision the discomfort or sorrow, then noticing how you'd adapt. The idea isn't to manifest negativity, but to train your heart to see you could still stand upright if that dreaded event occurs. You might be anxious about a major exam result, believing failure would ruin your future. By mentally walking through that outcome, failing the exam, retaking it, or adjusting career plans, you realize it wouldn't be the end of the world. Another angle is relationships. If you're so attached to a partner that the very thought of them leaving paralyzes you, spend a few minutes picturing life after a breakup. Yes, there'd be pain, but also a path forward. You'd stay with supportive friends or refocus on personal passions you once neglected. Recognizing your capacity for resilience strips that fear of its monstrous power. Afterwards, you might even value your partner more, fully enjoying the present without the overshadowing dread of what if I lose them. In property matters, negative visualization reduces the hold your assets have on your mind. Suppose you own an antique painting you deeply treasure. By envisioning it lost in a fire, feeling that pang, acknowledging you'd grieve, but also realizing you'd eventually cope, you undercut the anxiety of this must be safe forever. Freed from that tension, you can admire the painting in calm, not fear. Repeated negative visualization fosters a flexible spirit that sees worst case, not as devastation, but as a challenge to be met. By practicing it across different attachments, you systematically lighten your emotional load, discovering that letting go of illusions around these items or relationships can yield genuine inner peace. Lesson 6. Use small voluntary discomforts to loosen your grip. Another core Stoic method is periodically embracing minor discomforts to prove to yourself you can live without certain essentials. Maybe you skip your daily gourmet coffee or reduce your phone usage. These small self-imposed hardships reveal that while you may prefer comfort, you're not powerless without it. Imagine foregoing takeout for a week, cooking simple meals at home. Initially, it might feel restrictive, but you soon adapt. You realize your sense of satisfaction or identity isn't dependent on constant convenience. That realization breaks the mental chain of, I must have this to be okay. If you're highly attached to brand clothing, you might try wearing basic outfits for a few weeks. Discovering your confidence can stem from your character, not a logo. This shift from, I need to impress with external markers, to, I am enough as I am, loosens the psychological hold that material status has on you. Over time, by occasionally stepping outside your comfort zone, you build resilience. The possible future scenario of forced simplicity, like if you face a financial downturn, becomes less terrifying because you've shown yourself that simpler living isn't catastrophic. This also fosters gratitude. When you return to your usual comforts, you appreciate them more deeply, no longer seeing them as musts, but as privileges. The broader effect is a subtle sense of empowerment. Your peace and identity aren't chained to possessions or routines. You can let them go if need be. That knowledge softens the fear of life's unpredictable turns, whether it's losing a job or relocating unexpectedly. You become agile, ready to adapt, a hallmark of the Stoic approach to letting go. Instead of bracing against every possible loss, you move forward with a mindset that if it happens, you'll manage, and that perspective is profoundly liberating. Lesson 7. Channel regret into constructive direction. Regret can be a formidable block to letting go, especially if you dwell on how life should have been. Stoicism advocates a direct reframe. Glean the lesson, Then pivot the emotional energy into present actions. For instance, if you regret not launching a personal project earlier, you might harness that regret to galvanize you now. Instead of lamenting, "I've wasted my chance," you decide, "I'll start small this week." By transforming regret into forward motion, you avoid the self-flagellation that traps you in the past. Consider a painful friendship conflict you never resolved. Rather than reliving the meltdown, you reflect on what you learned about communication or boundaries. Then you practice it in current relationships, maybe by being more honest upfront or less likely to take offense at small irritations. Each time you catch yourself drifting into, "I should have done it differently," you remind yourself that you can't rewrite that event, but you can shape how you act now. That shift drains regret of its power to paralyze. Another dimension is personal growth. If you regret not continuing your education, Stoicism suggests you focus on learning opportunities available now. Perhaps you take an online course or study topics you love. Instead of letting regret corrode your self-esteem, you let it become a motivator for expansion. Over time, these steps accumulate, gradually neutralizing the sting of what might have been. Each day you see yourself making purposeful choices, the idea, "I missed my life's chance," fades. This approach marries accountability with self-kindness. You acknowledge your part in that regret. Maybe you procrastinated or avoided conflict resolution, but you also see no value in prolonged self-punishment. You own your misstep, correct what you can, and glean insight to prevent repetition. That entire cycle embodies letting go. No endless dwelling, no fatalistic guilt, just the calm acceptance of, "Yes, I stumbled, but I use it to step forward." The fear of regret loosens, replaced by trust in your ability to adapt. Freed from dwelling on the unchangeable, you reinvest in living fully now, forging a new sense of direction and self-respect. Lesson 8. Cultivate presence instead of anticipating every loss. Another stumbling block in letting go is anticipating the day something dear will vanish. You sabotage your current enjoyment by obsessing, "I might lose this job," or "this friend might leave." Stoicism encourages you to dwell in the present reality, savoring it while acknowledging that change is inevitable. If you're forever braced for the worst, you never fully taste the good in front of you. When you reflect that every relationship, possession, or life season is temporary, the Stoic response is not despair, but gratitude for each fleeting moment. Visualize a mother so worried her children will grow up fast that she never relaxes, overshadowing their childhood with her anxiety. A Stoic approach says, "Yes, they will grow up, so be wholeheartedly engaged in each stage." That presence ironically eases the eventual transition. Similarly, if you're traveling abroad and can't shake the fear that "I might get robbed" or the trip might be cut short, you risk missing the joy of discovery. By intentionally leaning into each day's wonder, you let go of that crippling vigilance. Should something go awry, you'll adapt. Meanwhile, you don't forsake the experiences awaiting you now. At work, you might always worry about future layoffs. By acknowledging job security is never absolute, you mentally ready yourself with Plan B. Then you put that fear aside, focusing on excelling today. This perspective frees you from chronic worry. Each day you choose to do your best, and if changes come, you handle them in real time, not in a state of preemptive panic. The result is an abiding sense of calm presence. You still take wise precautions, like saving money or maintaining strong relationships, but you refuse to let "what if I lose it" overshadow "what do I have right now." The ability to be fully present, unclouded by dread, is a defining element of Stoic letting go. It replaces anxiously clinging with open-handed gratitude, letting experiences flourish untainted by your fear that they might fade. Indeed, they will fade someday, but you'll meet that moment with acceptance and memory of having truly lived in the now. Lesson 9. Embody letting go in your social circles, setting quiet boundaries. Letting go often extends to interpersonal scenarios, like walking away from gossip, refusing to nurse grudges, or declining invitations that conflict with your core well-being. Stoicism frames boundary setting as a calm refusal to cling to social expectations or illusions of pleasing everyone. If your circle engages in endless drama, you can quietly, respectfully exit those conversations. That act of detachment spares you from pointless negativity. Rather than trying to correct everyone's attitudes, you step away, focusing on what fosters positivity or depth. Additionally, Stoicism helps you manage group pressure. If friends push you to overspend or overindulge, you can politely say no, explaining briefly or simply letting your silence convey resolve. Over time, they adapt or drift away. Either outcome is part of letting go. You realize you don't need universal approval to stand by your convictions. This autonomy sifts your circle for those who respect your boundaries, forging stronger, more genuine connections. Letting go also appears in how you handle misunderstandings. If a colleague misinterprets your intentions, you clarify once, speaking truthfully but concisely. If they persist in twisting your words, Stoicism advises you not to chase after them, desperate to fix their view. Instead, you let your consistent actions speak. If they remain stubborn, that's on them, not you. By releasing the urge to control their perception, you preserve your emotional harmony. Over time, others may note that you don't feed drama. If genuine conflict resolution is possible, you engage. If not, you step back. Freed from the friction of constant arguments, you invest your energy where it truly matters: your responsibilities, creativity, or healthy relationships. This quiet boundary setting fosters a reputation for calm self-respect. People realize you won't cling to forced alliances or petty validations. It doesn't mean you become aloof. You're open to meaningful dialogue, but unafraid to let go of shallow entanglements. Over months, your environment becomes less cluttered by toxic or trivial social knots. You discover that letting go in your social realm naturally lowers stress, allowing you to focus on mutual growth, supportive bonds, and the Stoic virtue of living by your inner moral compass. Lesson 10. Integrate letting go into every role, every day. Finally, letting go isn't a side project, but a unified approach that pervades each role, be it as friend, parent, spouse, employee, or leader in your community. Each morning, you might remind yourself, I will hold outcomes lightly and center my peace in what's truly mine, my judgment, my actions. Then, throughout the day, you practice noticing when you slip into clinging or controlling. If tension arises, over your toddler's tantrum, a teammate's missed deadline, or your own fear of messing up a project, you pause. Ask if it's within your direct control. If not, you mentally release it, focusing on how you can show up with virtue and clarity. In family life, that might mean letting your teenager experiment with choices and learn from consequences, rather than micromanaging their every move. At work, you might do your best on a task, but accept that the final decision belongs to higher management. You refrain from ruminating, but they must see it my way, recognizing that you can't force them. That daily habit of letting go accumulates into a more stable emotional baseline. Issues come and go, but you remain anchored. When day's end arrives, you reflect briefly. Where did I hold too tightly? How could I release more gracefully next time? Through this consistent mini-review, you refine your Stoic practice step by step. Over weeks or months, the difference is tangible. You're less reactive in traffic, less anxious about others' opinions, more able to pivot when plans fail. People might label you calm under pressure, but it's really the result of training your mind to see illusions of control for what they are, letting each illusion slip through your fingers. In essence, letting go becomes as natural as breathing, a quiet stance that says you'll do what's in your power with full heart and greet the rest with acceptance. That posture transforms your roles from stressful obligations into purposeful expressions of your values. Freed from the weight of illusions, you discover a resilience that no external chaos can topple. The Stoic concept of letting go, woven into daily life, fosters not passivity, but a confident, fluid engagement with reality as it unfolds. Have you seen how letting go isn't about apathy or giving up, but about reclaiming your right to live unchained by illusions. Across these 10 steps, from examining attachments and releasing regrets, to practicing purposeful silence and shaping your environment, you've discovered practical ways to lighten your mental load. Small shifts in perspective, repeated daily, can yield profound calm and renewed freedom. If you're ready to break free from clinging to outcomes or past wounds, be sure to subscribe for more Stoic insights that will guide you toward inner peace and everyday resilience. The journey begins now, one breath, one acceptance, one gentle act of letting go at a time.